Okay, so it's a kind of cognitive analysis of the skills that we should create or cultivate in our students. So first, we need to teach them to manage their attention. Of course, this is about stop watching your Facebook instead of listening to the professor. But it is a little bit more than this. Okay, first, we need to choose what are our topics of interest. What do we want to learn? Okay, if we don't decide that we want to learn this, we will not learn anything. That's why, because if now we say, okay, learning is autonomous. Yes, but if it is autonomous, you have to discipline yourself. So you have to choose your priorities. And then you have to learn to select the relevant or the right sources of information. What does relevant means? It's not something that is real or objective. Relevance is, of course, something relative. It depends of what you want to learn, for example. It depends of your context. It depends of a lot of things. But you have to evaluate what are the relevant sources for you. So it's a question of judgment. And of course, the sources are not the platforms, okay? Because sometimes I listen to some journalists that say, oh, Twitter is not a source that can be trusted. Okay. But Twitter is not a source. Twitter is a platform. The sources are people or institution. And when you don't trust a platform, you trust people or you trust institutions. Once you know what you want to learn, once you have selected your sources, then you receive data and you have to interpret the data. And of course you can use statistical methods to analyze the data. This is very often done in the field of digital humanities, for example, historians or even journalists or people working in marketing and so on. They are using software to analyze the data. But to analyze the data, to interpret them correctly, you don't need only quantitative methods. You need also hypotheses. You need theories about the way things work. You need to make causal hypothesis. Okay, this is the cause of this. Because if you analyze the data to understand a situation, ultimately to act on this situation, if you want to act, you must understand how it works. What is the cause of what? Okay, so you need causal theories. And finally, you need to maintain your memory that currently is always in the cloud. You don't have anymore your repository of data on your hard disk. Okay, it's in the cloud. It should be in the cloud, of course, because you need to share your memory.
Esa memoria.
To give access to the people with whom you work, for example, or the people with whom you learn. So you have a lot, I'm not going into the technical details, but you have a lot of applications today that helps you to do this. If some people are interested, you can go on my blog. It's called Pierre Lévy's blog. And there is a place where you can click, and it's called Curation. And you'll have a list of all the places where I do this data curation. And there is not only you should not only maintain this memory physically, you should also maintain it intellectually by categorizing the data in a consistent way. Okay, because a memory that is not categorized, it is not very easy to use. Okay, you should be able to retrieve the information. So these are the personal skills that are needed to evolve in this new communication environment and to be efficient in this new communication environment, to be able to efficiently collaborate. The second level is the critical analysis of the sources. This is very important because ultimately what we want to know is not the information. You don't say, I want to know the information. This has no meaning. What you want to know is the source of information, okay? And the information gives you signs that help you to understand what is the source. Okay. So the source can be one person, can be a social group, can be an institution, but it can be an ecosystem, it can be a lot of things. It can be a city, it can be, This is the real source, and it's the source that you want to know. The first thing to do is to diversify the sources on a particular subject, or to multiply the point of views. Not only one voice, but several voices on the same subject. And then you can cross the different information and see if there are contradictions, if information are confirmed, and so on. So the sources are criticizing themselves, okay? But you have to be attentive. Then, instead of looking other point of view, you have to be able to understand the categories that are used by this particular source, the theories that are behind its narrative, and finally to identify the narrative itself. Ultimately, we can say that one source or one person or one group or one institution is a particular narrative. Okay. What is your story? And then you can compare the narrative of the source and the real actions of this source in its environment. Okay. And of course, there can be discrepancies between what the source is saying and what it is doing. That's why I called it the pragmatic aspect of the critique. Is the source transparent about the way it is financed, for example? Is it transparent about its references or the sources of the source? Where do you get this information? Do you quote your own sources? And ultimately, what is your agenda? Okay. What do you want to do? What are you doing here? What are the pragmatic effects of the discourse that you are emitting, of the information that you are sending to us? Okay, this is the critique of the source. And finally, when you have the ability to manage your personal intelligence, when you are able to criticize the sources, then you can participate to collective intelligence. So, collective intelligence is not a tool that is easy to use. It is not something that is there. It is a goal to reach. Okay? It is what we want to do, but we have to build it in the mind of the people. So this stigmergic communication, okay, stigmergic communication means indirect communication between people through a common memory. Okay? So there are rules for this kind of communication. Okay. For example, it's very simple. You don't ask questions to a group where this question has already been asked 7 times, okay, or 100 times. Okay. So you try to look to the responses that have already been given. So you save the time of the people. So you read what people have already written in the memory before writing, because what you write can be completely redundant, for example. So you need a kind of awareness of the communication environment. Then there is a kind of moral dimension. You have to recognize that you have a lot of power because you are an author, you are a librarian, you are a critic, you can do a lot of things that people of the last generation could not do. Okay, you are empowered. So the infosphere or the common memory is an emergence of all the actions of all the people who participated in it. Okay, it's an emergence. So we should take responsibility for this. We should realize that what we do when we buy something, when we create a link, when we put a tag, everything that we do something on the internet, we create this common memory. So it's a responsibility. And this is the last slide. It's about collaborative learning. So you have all this personal intelligence. The IP means Inteligencia Personal. And all these people that have the skills that I have just described, they work together to create a common memory. It can be at the scale of the small team, it can be a big administration, it can be a city, it can be, okay, there are many different possible scales, okay, of this process of collective learning. And this common memory, I call it a repository of explicit knowledge, because the data are categorized and evaluated by the people, of course, not by specialists or by some external authority. It's an emergent common memory. So we have to imagine that there is a particular domain of practice. It can be pedagogy, it can be chemistry, it can be a lot of different things. And these people are sharing this common area of practice. And in this domain of practice, there are a lot of knowledge that are part of the internal reflexes of people that come from their experience, that knowledge that is difficult to explain, or a kind of knowledge that is very closely related to a particular environment. So the challenge is to transform this tacit knowledge into an explicit knowledge. In general, you cannot transform all the tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge. It's something that there is always more tacit knowledge than explicit knowledge. Anyway, you can transform some of your tacit knowledge into some explicit knowledge. So you have to decontextualize or to depersonalize this knowledge, to make it more abstract, in order to share it in the common memory. So that people will be able to take it and to appropriate it, to contextualize, to transform it into their own context, their own practice, so they transform this explicit knowledge into their own tacit knowledge.